Good day, and welcome to another episode of AgentX11 Hollywood Dark Journalist. Another light in this darkened world. I am your host, Penny L.A. Shepherd, and I am Agent X11. My co-hosts are David Zublik, Heather Day, Joan Renee, Chris Montgomery, Skip Press, Tom Althouse, Jessica Garza, Edward Medallion, Dr. Keith Abloh, and TJ Ward.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are tonight's entertainment.
Agent X11 Hollywood Dark Journalist begins now. And welcome to another episode of Agent X11 Hollywood Dark Journalist. I am Agent X11. My name is Penny L.A. Shepherd. I am joined today by Brian Singh. This is actually Brian Singh's segment. Brian Singh presents, and we have some fascinating guests under Brian Singh. My other co-hosts are Joan Renee and Brian M. Bowden. Brian M. Bowden has Third Eye Live, and he is also a guest on The Awake Nation. Joan Renee is my co-host on Agent X11, as well as Awake Nation News and Awake Nation, and she is one of the leaders of the Trauma Triage team. Apparently, we have a lot of shows. Our guest today is Michael Horn. Michael Horn has a lot to tell us about Billy Meier. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Penny, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. As I mentioned briefly, before we started, I'm very glad because of the difficulties that we have sometimes getting this information out. And a tip of the hat. I'll just leave it at that.
You had said that within the UFO community that the door shut on you and people were not receiving you or your information anymore. Is that correct?
To a pretty high degree. That kind of a shutting of doors started really in about 2006 or 2008. I had been speaking a few times at the International UFO conference or expo, whatever, in Lofton.
Yeah.
And I happened to have spoken out about things that I felt were necessary to bring to the attention of people. I don't want to dance around anything. So, and since our time is limited, my thing was that I knew from my own interactions with people who were prominent, and some are still in that industry or that field, that there was fraudulent stuff. There were claims that were being made and representations of things that were lacking evidence. And I had learned early on in my study, starting to study the Meier material, that evidence is the important thing, not our beliefs, not our theories, whether they are fact, based in conspiracy or myth or just, good guessing. People come around and come up with ideas about things. In the Billy Meier context, this is a man who has 83 years of ongoing contacts with extraterrestrial human beings. Now, he states that that's fact. I don't know, but I can tell you, I don't know where else he got his evidence. I don't know where else he got his information. So when I'm showing up at these conferences and I'm able to put up screens and show one after another phenomenal, still irreproducible, pre-digital UFO photo or film, and everybody is coming up and talking about things, but they present no evidence. I spoke out about that. And I said, I'm sorry, this isn't real. This is, I didn't know the politics of these things at first because people literally said to me, well, you shouldn't criticize people in this field. I said, well, what kind of a field of study is there going on with this ufology thing if you can't treat it the same way you would any credible field of study where people disagree, they call things out, and then if somebody says, well, that's got to be a this, that, and the other thing, it's well, present the evidence. Well, this is true. Present the evidence. So I was not very politically correct with that, and it's not that stopped my presentations. I was brought over to Hong Kong to present to 1,300 people one day, 200 media and other people. This was some years back. And 1,300 people in this audience who wanted to know the truth. And when the question and answer time came, it wasn't like doing it here at a UFO conference. And then MUFON, there's many things about MUFON that I had objected to. Billy Meier was told in 1953, before MUFON existed, that they would exist, and he'd have problems with that. And to the credit, in my opinion, of a newer crop of people in MUFON, they've had me come now and make several presentations. I'm going to be doing another one in Sedona in December. So it's not a walk in the park where, oh, let's go and invite this guy and he's going to show us all this great stuff. But Billy Meier has survived 100% of his life for his troubles. I can't complain about it.
Michael, can you tell us how did you come to meet Billy, and how did you come to be involved? This is your life study. How did you meet him?
Well, it started in 1979. I walked into a bookstore in LA called the Bodhi Tree. There was this phenomenal photo book facing me as I walked in the door. I bought it. I started to read. There wasn't like a deep read, but there was information. The pictures were phenomenal. And I did everything I could to try to find more material. It wasn't until 1986, my first trip into Sedona. I was in a cafe that no longer exists on 89A. It was
What year was that?
Pardon me?
What year was that?
1986.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I was there in the 90s. I performed out there. Continue.
Okay. Well, this was 86. I was in my daughter and another friend of mine were there. There was one other person sitting at the opposite end of the cafe, called him over. We spoke. Somehow, paranormal, UFOs, this, that. Billy Meier's name came up. He said, have you read the contact reports? I said, what's that? He said, in your photo book, you remember those quotes? Yes. I have 1,800 pages, he told me, of the conversations this man has had between 1975 and 78 with those people. I said, wow, when you come back to LA, come up to Decker Canyon, I'll give it to you. I returned, I went up, he gave me 1,800 pages. That was an ongoing read for months and months, because also the translation was not done by somebody who was fluent in English in the way they were fluent in German. So the verbs are at the end. I'm studying. Then I see an article in 1988 in a newspaper, that's 2 years after Sedona, A-bomb testing tied to ozone damage. It rang a bell with me, and I'm starting to read it. Big Lawrence Livermore National Labs. And they're giving percentages. And I wait a minute. I know this. How could I know that? The light goes on. I reach under the bed, the first 100 pages. oh my gosh, it's in here, 1975. That was the beginning. In other words, what happened was when I started to read that information, and then when I got this ding corroboration, which I couldn't believe. I'm sitting here reading 1975, 76. This is a new discovery. It's 1988. That would shift the focus away for me from the great UFO stuff, even though I've lectured on it. I've been, involved with all sorts of stuff with the evidence. I've seen some of the ships, all that business. But
so, Michael, were you involved with the UFO community prior to Billy?
I had been interested in this since I was a child. I used to have dreams going back to
I was going to say, may I ask why? What sparked your interest as a child?
I would have dreams about these craft in the sky. They looked flying in groups. And then I was growing up when the earliest of the space shows, like Buck Rogers and Tom Corbett and all this stuff, was radio, then TV. And it just captured my interest. And I wanted to know when I was 10 years old, I wanted to know the truth about God and Jesus out of nowhere. These kind of things were, going on for me. And so it was in 1953 in a high school where I'm standing in the lobby of this high school. A guy walks up to me out of nowhere and starts talking about his dad's in the Air Force. And his dad was involved in something about finding a flying saucer that they then took to a base in Ohio. I would learn later that was Roswell. These things would pop up in my life. And so I was gravitating towards this information. But then after 88, 90, all these things are popping up in the news, and I already have read them. I knew them. 2000, somebody says to me, why don't you join up the study group? You can then go to Switzerland. Other people come from around the world to meet and work together on the land and all, and Billy lives there. I went in 2000. That was the first time I met Meier. I, of course, had read lots of material by that time, but still, here I'm walking up there with a guy from Texas. We had gotten on a connecting flight together in New York. We arrive, we throw our stuff in the bed and breakfast. We walk up to this house that Billy, it's a big farmhouse that he renovated. As we get to the door, Billy walks out. He has one arm, so he has an only partial left arm under which he had some books. And as he comes out the door, my friend Mark from Texas says, Billy, on behalf of all humankind, I want to say, and he starts this whole thing, and Billy says, don't mention it, Mark. It's my duty. And he shook his hand and smiled more. And that was very important to me because I had been on my own personal turnaround spiritual quest, if you want to call it that, back in about 1970. And the only companion I had been kind of homeless in New York City and all this. And I had the I Ching, the Chinese book of change. And I had memorized all these hexagrams and things. And I didn't know any of this. I'd sit around with these coins and I'd throw coins in. And in this book, I loved it because it talked about the highest good all the time. The superior person always fulfills their duty. And to be without blame, one must live in this kind of an integrity. And here's the first thing I hear out of Billy Meier's mouth is, don't mention it, it's my duty. And I went, whoa. And I put aside the I Ching, and then I would move into studying more the real core material. It isn't the UFO photos. It isn't even the prophecies and predictions that prove space and time travel. You can prove that in 15 minutes. There's a teaching here. It's called the creation energy teaching. Non-religious, belief-free, a study. Doesn't tell you what you should think, or it says this, and this, and you test these things. You apply them in your life and see how they work. And it's just a masterful. I mean, we only have maybe 12 books out of 60 plus that Meier's written. He doesn't talk much about UFOs here and there. Yes, things in his life and all that. But this is the reason he's here, is to bring forward this teaching. It's also the teaching that the extraterrestrial people study. They have
so What's extraterrestrial? Was there just one extraterrestrial race that reached out to him?
In 1975, Billy has his contacts with the third person that he would be learning from in the race that's called the Plejaren, Plejaren. He's told at that time to refer to them as the Pleiadians. And he says, Pleiadians? There's no such thing. There's no life in the Pleiades. And they said, yes, we know that. But here's what's going to happen in your life starting now. And again, he'd been meeting with a couple people, for some years before that, 30 years before or whatever. They said, once you come forward, you are going to be publishing information. You're going to have photo opportunities. You will have a vast collection, if you will, of material to release to the world. And what will be happening is then there will be an onslaught over time of people who are going to come forward to say they are meeting with us, we're dating, we're having their babies, they're having our baby, all sorts of stuff. And they're going to be using this word because they're going to be getting it from your material. So we ask you not to bother us every time somebody comes forward to say they're a Pleiadian contactee or they're doing this with Pleiadians or channeling Pleiadians. It's not going to be so. Some people are motivated simply by they're inspired. They want to be connected to something. They resonate with things here, but it won't have anything directly to do with us. Other people will try to make careers out of it and profit from this. Won't have anything to do with us either. So you carry on for a while. Then in 1998, I think it was, they said, drop the Pleiadian thing. There's enough of this in the world. It's a lot of confusion. And you may just start speaking more about, using the name that we use for this. And they provided information on how they live and their history. This is no Space Brothers trip here. This is,
Right.
a whole other thing.
So how do they live?
Pick a category to start with, because
and then Michael, is that an Adamski reference when you speak about Space Brothers?
Well, Brian, it's interesting you mentioned Adamski. He met Adamski, and Adamski was not a genuine contactee. According to this, I should say this. I like to say this at the beginning, according to the information in the case, because there's things anybody here.
If I may, Adamski may have run into literally Germans from the breakaway civilization. And they may have been masquerading as Space Brothers and doing their orgy thing, but it might really have been related to the German secret breakaway space program, especially in the wake of World War II.
Well, there's a lot of information about these kinds of things. There was the Thule Society, THULE, that also ended up being a very powerful group that advised Hitler. There's information, historical information in this material that goes back eons and eons. So just to tie it into this whole thing with Adamski, since the question was raised, Meier and one of the extraterrestrial, his second contact person, allegedly called Asket, confronted Adamski at a presentation in Europe in which he was a bit unnerved by the fact that here's Billy, and here's this woman, and clearly they're nailing him as there have been a couple of occasions where there have been some encounters like this that were done very deliberately for historical purposes. But Adamski utilized certain techniques to create his films and photographs that he may have well been capturing even some of the, those craft from the German with a Z.
The Hannibal.
The Hannibal craft and the other ones. But he wasn't a contactee with any extraterrestrial race. And that's a very, very, very rare thing. And I say this to people here, everybody here, we want to know the truth about extraterrestrials and all that stuff. And as I was hinting earlier when I said this to Penny and Joan, I didn't get quite this far, but in ufology, what has bothered me is there's an unasked question that hangs over and nobody asks it. Unasked question. If the contacts are true and real, what's the reason for them? It's not for us to chase lights in the sky.
We can answer that. We're ufology 3.0 now, Michael, and we can already answer that. And the answer is that this is a very specific time for humanity and the earth to spiritually ascend, and it also represents a big changeover for Earth from being basically dominated and exploited as a prison planet by the Anunnaki and negative draconian elements and grays mostly, to a more free and positive. And the transition obviously doesn't just affect Earth and humanity, but the rest of galactic society and interdimensional society. And so this exopolitically brings us to the federations and the councils and possibly, groups such as the Plejarans.
Okay. So, Brian, we can talk straight with each other. I'll give you part of this answer, which is in some ways not different from what you said. I summarize it this way. The reason for these contacts is to help us assure our very threatened future survival. Now, we can flesh that out over time, and I think we should, especially in the world we have today, with the events that are occurring now, which are ticking off as they have been foretold for over 10,000 years through the earlier contactees in this case. Now, you said a few things: Anunnaki, Greys, Draconians. When I've gone to the conferences I've gone to, because there are others outside of our American ufology thing, people bring these things up, and I'll say, well, would you like to know the information from Meier for your own consideration? As for the Greys are not extraterrestrials. Those were androids. They are the ones that were indeed found at the Roswell, and there have been other crashes here in Russia, other places. When there are beings found, they are not the extraterrestrials, according to this information. They are their androids. They're very advanced AIs, if you will. We're not going to get to that part. As for the Anunnaki, which was
Michael, if I may, I would say that yes, there are Greys that are more of the bio-android types, but there are absolutely many types of biologically fleshed out Greys of such as and many of them, this is where, because they're the biological Zeta Reticulan type, some of them are even starting to interbreed with humanity. And then that's where you get the Sasani and the Yael specifically. And
when
so those, they get the Sasani, S-A-S-S. Well, Bashar, and Bashar pushes a jab, so I don't trust him, just because I believe that there may be a more negatively or service to self type Sasani collective, and Bashar is representing them. That's not to say that all Sasani are as transhumanist New World Order as Bashar's Sasani collective.
Okay, Brian, but we jumped over something very critical.
Sure.
I just want to go back to it. I would do what I said I'd do at these things right here. Where's your tangible evidence? Okay.
I can give various proofs. I can give other people now in our community has now videography, very high definition evidence of orbs, ships, beings coming through. So we already have that. We have other people with material analysis of stuff. We have people who are then digging up the Wahilo stones, carbon dating them anywhere up to 20,000 plus years old. Okay. And then having multiple people on a blind basis, remote viewing and psychics contacting and interfacing with the beings and getting corroborating data. And so when you say, where's your evidence? In the 70s, it might've worked to say no one else had any evidence, but that doesn't fly today.
Okay, hold it. It's a challenge you're giving me, so I'm going to challenge you back. I'm familiar with remote viewing because I'm the person that actually put together the first technical remote viewing home study course That was a fellow named Ed Dames. Now, let's just stop for a second about evidence. What you have just said to me, I wanted to go back to this, Anunnaki, because this was brought up in the Meier material. Now, this shouldn't be a he said, she said, he said thing. It's based on evidence. So, well, Meier's take was, first of all, people have to understand that the planet that the Anunnaki supposedly come from isn't a planet. It's an orbiting body that is uninhabited, the Anunnaki whole thing. Sitchin, I read Sitchin, I was fascinated, but he got it wrong, according to Meier and the Playaran who chimed in. When we talk about 20,000 years, it's a mere drop in the bucket. The history is given through the Playaran and Meier go back over 22 million years, identifying different races that had come to Earth, this and that. I mean, vast stuff. But why would I even want to refer to that? Simply because we have had, since certainly the analyses starting back in 77, 78, an abundance of hard evidence. How could this man know when and where to go to shoot rolls of film, take films? I mean,
but that's the thing, Michael. I'm not discounting Billy on that. Billy and everything that he did in his work and his contacts and his evidence. I'm not discounting that. But then at the point where Billy says, I've got this evidence, and then, but all you guys, you're all fake, or I'm the only right one. That's where I'm kind of like, well, wait a second. I run into lots of contactees, and lots of them, some have only dealt with reptilians, some have only dealt with Pleiadians, some have only dealt with grays, positive or negative grays. And so some of them love all grays and some of them hate all grays. And I see these very clear prejudices and biases. And what I'd like to say is, I think I'm not taking away from the authenticity of Billy and his own work, but at the point where he says everyone else, they've got it all wrong, and where they don't even exist, you know, that's where I'm like, well, wait a second. I've got plenty of people with other evidence that maybe Billy isn't privy to that, but it doesn't mean that they don't exist. I don't see it. I don't see it, man. Yeah.
See it. So let me say this. I first connected up with Lee Elders, Britt Elders, and Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens starting in 1986. These were high-level investigators who, there was, Lee and Britt were skeptics about the whole thing. Wendell Stevens was trained in the Air Force, tasked beginning in 47 with studying UFOs, left the Air Force to get into this. These are people who brought to the world the incontrovertible evidence of contacts with beings that don't exist here. So I have, since going back in this whole stuff and examining, I used to go to channelings from Daryl Anka, Bashar stuff. I've gone to all these things. So far, nobody has presented that I know, I haven't seen, incontrovertible proof of items of verified extraterrestrial manufacture. Number one.
Like, we got the Boogosphere.
Can I finish just a moment, please?
Wait, no, we got the Boogosphere. I'm just going to say, I don't want to. We got literally worldwide attention on the Boogosphere. They have video of it flying around. It falls. And now they're analyzing it, and then you're saying, "Oh, no one has got evidence." I'm like saying, "Well,
Brian,
that doesn't count."
I'm going to jump. I want to jump in here for just a second.
Yes, and then I want Brian.
One of the things that happens when you've done certain research, each one of you has evidence for what you know, but that does not discount the evidence that the other one has. And I think this is Brian's point. So it's very easy to say, where's your evidence, and then walk away and never look. Because you won't find it that way. So no, well, listen to me, please.
Yes.
So you got a lot of information, and you've got evidence to back it up. Brian also has information and evidence to back it up, but you may not necessarily have seen each other's information, but it is out there. And so I think we need to have a little bit of respect and not have, this is the only truth, because there is, when you're talking about even the world, you say, okay, I went to the world and it's full of fish and it's water. Well, somebody else landed on land and they say, oh, no, you're wrong. It's full of animals with fur.
Yes.
And so I think this is what we're looking at, is two people that have different information. You both have evidence, and it's better to come together than it is to try and discount what the other person has.
Joan,
Absolutely.
I am not the one who makes claims that Billy does this, that, and the other thing. I'm trying to state something that's a little bit different.
That's fine.
So the Boogosphere is very interesting. I don't think it was made here, but we don't have any conclusive. We have something phenomenal. Jaime Maussan, who's very much involved in that whole research, is a major supporter of Billy's case because he knows of its authenticity. So let me please finish saying something. I rely, in terms of evidence, I want to see scientific analyses of things that are claimed to be representing extraterrestrial stuff. In Billy's case, we have an abundance of independent scientific experts who've authenticated that. And as I've said, the UFOs aren't the most important part, but we have a US astronaut. Hey, Billy Meier case, those are great photographs. He meets with extraterrestrials. Why are people calling it a hoax? See, Billy's still meeting with these people while he's dodging people that are trying to kill him. Fortunately, nobody involved in ufology has had to go through the types of things. Now, neutrally, I say that since we have criteria, and in any scientific study, you have criteria for examining evidence. We can say, we don't know what this is. We don't know where this came from. Is it extraterrestrial? For instance, the metal samples that Billy Meier turned over to the investigators, analyzed at IBM. The scientist, Marcel Vogel, is on video saying, I cannot, as a scientist, with all of the resources available to me, make this. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Here's the possibilities.
So, Michael, no one here is doubting that the veracity of Billy. The issue is that when Billy comes onto the scene and he presents evidence, great. But at the point where he veers out of his lane and then says, oh, these guys, they all have it wrong and they're all fake, what that does is, hold on a second, from the perspective of other people in our community, I'll speak as one of them, okay, we say, well, wow, you had me at great evidence, but then at the point where now he's standing on the hill attacking everyone else, now that to me is a red flag.
Right.
Please
Except
explain.
He doesn't do that. His evidence speaks for itself. And let's go to the other shoe to drop. Since Billy Meier was about 10 years old, he's been publishing information. And that information has been important because it has largely been specific prophetic information. It is the higher standard of proof. This is what I'm trying to get to. Photographs, we can argue. See, this is what happens with UFO. We could all say, well, I have a photo. I don't care about it. We know those are authentic. I was interrogated for 3 months by a USAF, OSI, Department of Defense, former supervisor case, whole thing, who came to me over the phone saying, I think this is a hoax. And then he proved to himself that the case was singularly authentic as a contact case. Okay, we put that aside. How did Billy Meier publish information going back to 1947 specifically about a megalomaniacal Hitler-like leader that would arise in the US who would put the world on the brink of extinction? How did he write about in 1947 about a disease that would be spread and a deadly vaccine that would be very damaging to women who are carrying children? How did he publish in 1948 through now the warnings about an environmental upheaval in the world that would at a certain point be completely unstoppable? How did he publish the warnings in 1944? Well, I just want to say, I could do this all day long. That's where the higher standard of proof is. So if Billy says this, that, and the other thing, I go to look is this legit? But I go the other way around. When there's a new discovery, this is why I think Dr. Yu would be very interested, because Billy published information on black holes and Mars, every planet in the solar system, and discoveries made by NASA up to 30 and more years before NASA discovered them. This is a different context. This is something that does not fall into the realm of ufology and people's claims about extraterrestrial races and stuff, because we have historical information and then people discover things. The pyramids, how did we find out? Finally, we found out that the people who actually built the pyramids, not talking about the technology, these were not slaves, they were free people. Oh, well, Billy published it 25 years ago and they just confirmed it recently. These kinds of things, we have 250 plus examples. So the question I asked, why should I pay attention? I still try to test, did this thing, can I prove that he published this? Yeah, we have copyrights. That clears the deck. It makes this a different playing field because we're now coming closer to, well, the reason for this material is to help us assure our future survival. That sounds nice. That's great. Yeah, well, they are publishing some stuff here about the destruction of 2 buildings in New York City that are going to happen in 14 years after he publishes it in 1987. There's these earthquakes are going to occur in this part of Italy in 2016. They'll be the precursors to the eruptions of these volcanoes. Oh, they started to become active now. We have hundreds error-free. So this isn't an argument about people who claim about draconians and who cares? I can't do anything with UFOs. None of us can. This is where I want so much for the conversation to come up. Like elevate. And to take this material to people who are passionately concerned about the state of the world, as well as the greater picture, the reality of other more advanced beings in this creation who are hanging out, so to speak, hoping.
I'm going to let Brian Bowden speak, and we only have a few more moments. Brian?
I've known about Billy for decades. I've been in this 40 plus years in the research investigation. I am a remote viewer. And what I find in the UFO community is it's like the allegory of the cave. It all depends on your perspective and where your information is coming from. Just like the victor writes history, doesn't mean that it's true. And we're finding out now that we've all been deceived between the historical record, the fossil record. There are other individuals that are just getting general information from other tests that have nothing to do with extraterrestrials. Now, when you get into extraterrestrials, there are hundreds of different races. Each one has their own agenda and narrative. Billy may have been picked by one race and he believes everything there. And the race, when you get out of the earth, past, present, and future happens at the same time. It's not anything miraculous that they are seeing certain events and timelines as we travel the timeline. But then again, with what Brian was saying, there are other individuals. The narrative changes based on who you're speaking of and what their experience is.
But Brian, I might argue, I'm going to say there's draconians and these and these and these and Plejarians.
Right.
And that's one thing, but then it's to say another thing to say there's Plejarians, but then there's not.
And I agree. You can't just,
well, wait a second.
So if Billy is here and everything else is no, this is where it is, that's unfair. If you're a true researcher and investigator, in my opinion, of this subject matter, like I am, like Brian is, you have a book that's filled with a variety of hypotheses. You cannot discredit anything until evidence comes forward to prove that it doesn't exist. And give Billy some credit. Yes, he's done some work. He's published some things, but that is the narrative from who has contacted Billy. There are people that have been contacted by draconians and reptilians. They have a different narrative. And then what happens is you get people that are
wait,
Helsinki
right there, Michael.
Hmm.
None of us shake our heads when we talk about Billy contacting Plejarans
Well,
and vice versa. But then at the moment where we talk about people being in contact with draconians or other beings, because Billy said they don't exist, it's like beyond the pale. It's like, well, wait a second, buddy.
Excuse me, both you guys respectively, Brian's with a Y, Brian with an I. You will have, and this is a conversation I would be glad to have, and I'll be glad to visit you in Sedona if you want, or anywhere else, unless and until you put down evidence for the existence of something that you want to use as a reference point. See, Billy doesn't need to. I say I cannot to date prove. Oh, these
we have carvings going back 30,000 years of ET beings of all shapes and sizes, including Greys, Draconians, Anunnaki beings, and they're depicted, and then they're all worldwide, and then they're in hieroglyphs, and then people are contacting them on a daily basis, and I speak with those people, but none of them exist, or they're all hallucinating. And none of this is evidence. It just doesn't count.
Doesn't count. Another instance, Michael,
existence here. Just accept. You guys are. I don't know how familiar you are with the scientific methods. If we bring something up and we say, "Well, this exists,"
I'm a biochemist.
The information here on the extraterrestrials that have come and gone, and the people that Meier.
Brian's a biochemist, and Brian Bowden has been doing this for many, many years.
And I studied physics and astronomy, so I was supposed to be an astrophysicist. But
I think what's operative here is the respect for one another, the respect for others, actual representations, the respect for evidence, in which Brian is showing you evidence, but it's getting refuted. And I guess that's the bad part about it, is that you are asking for evidence, but when people are showing you evidence, you're like, that's not evidence. And you not understand how imperial evidence is collected. I was married to a police officer, so I come from it from a totally different respect, from a legal aspect in the collection of evidence. I also worked in the legal environment for over 45 years. So I look at evidence in another manner as well.
Can I just point out one fact, Michael? I mean, we have thousands of individuals for the last 100 years that have had evidence that has been ripped away from them and put away into black budgets, and it's gone. But there's certain evidence that comes out from some of these people who have contact with these races. I'm going to throw one at you. And I still believe he got railroaded, but Stan Romanek, a man who has a 5th grade education, talks about element 115 decades before it's discovered. So Billy, although he had his experience over there, there's Robert Vanderbroek, who is having interactions with these creatures, has tentacles that were given to him that have been studied and tested throughout the world. And the information has been withheld because of the outcome. I'm not denying what you're saying. I'm just saying we've got to take into everybody's consideration and what evidence is. If you want hardcore evidence, you better be in a black budget project and have like level 18 clearance on top secret, because you're not going to get it anyplace else.
Okay, if we could, you know what? You're a scientist, you're an investigator, you have investigative experience in your history. So to make this productive, really productive for this community, because this could be a transition point, we really should get together and start agreeing on context and a structure, and why we care about this. See, I don't care if there's 1 million people. Look, I had some experiences myself. They're subjective. They happen to have all been proven true. It started in 1972. It's anecdotal, though. How can I prove where that came from, even though that information was fulfilled? And my goodness, how did that happen? It doesn't matter. I want to know what we can come to understand is the reason for any valid contacts. What do we throw out? What do we keep? So when we are given information, decades, and Billy is still meeting with these people, and he's dodging assassins. There are 28 attempts in his life. We can't just do this with Billy because I am too familiar. I've read the stuff about the Zeta Reticulum and the UMO, which is an interesting bunch of material, but I'm still trying to see, well, where does this fit in? What is it? What can we do with it? I can do something if I'm warned about a disease, if I'm warned that there's going to be an attack somewhere, if I'm warned about these different things because somebody tangibly cares about our collective future survival on the planet and has given us thousands of pages of information. You can take all the UFO evidence out of the equation.
And Michael, that might be your niche right
Mhm.
there, is to look at that information, and then you are forewarned. And I think where it needs to, because I get an oxymoron here. One is show me the evidence, and then the other one is that doesn't matter. And I think that's where the disjointment comes in when you're talking to two people that are heavily into it and they are scientists. So I think where what we want to focus on is what your niche is, and that is you are getting this information and you have an opportunity to forewarn, but not use that to discount what anyone else is doing. And I think we can go from there in a more positive way.
Well, and I love Michael. Mike, I love that your suggestion that we figure out how we can have a more coherent framework, right? And then, so this is where I say, Billy says X, Y, and Z, and then I'm not in disagreement with X and Y, but the point where he says Z doesn't exist, and then I say, well, here's a lot of Z over here. Are we willing to say, well, maybe Billy is right on lots of things, thousands of pages, but maybe he needs to shift his perspective a little bit on Z, alpha, gamma, beta, whatever. And maybe we could then, that would be a more refined, under a higher understanding versus no, Z doesn't exist. Z doesn't exist. Z doesn't exist. Like, that's getting tiring.
I want to just chime in for 1 second, Michael, if you don't mind.
That isn't what Billy's doing. It's not even what I'm doing. For instance, guys, when Brian
can you accept that draconians? Can you accept that draconians exist? Draconians, alpha draconians, Siacar draconians, 18-foot tall winged draconians. They're known as the Siacar Alpha Draco, who used to run something known as the Siacar Alpha Draco Orion Naboo Empire. Okay, do those exist, or do those not exist because Billy never saw them, or Billy said they don't exist? That's my only question.
Is that a question? My answer would be, show the evidence so we can look at the evidence for something. For instance, when Brian held up those things, that is evidence, but you can't conflate it with what the other information, because we don't. If those things that you held up.
Well, what if I got information? If I hold this up and other people say, well, this is this group and they're doing this, and then I ask another person on a blind basis without even telling them what object they're viewing, and then they give me data and it corroborates, then do I accept that or not? Is that acceptable data? Is that, do you count that as scientific evidence or not? If I did on a blind scientific remote viewing basis?
Well, I've done remote viewing. There are things.
So is Brian. Brian with a Y, and I myself have also. Unfortunately, we're running out of time.
Brian,
ask everyone where they can be found. So, Michael, where can people find you?
Well, I have They Fly blog, theyflyblog.com, and you find me there. Find me through my email. I have email there, michael@theyfly.com. And I would like, I think, there's a thing, I thought about the I Ching. There's a thing that says difficulty at the beginning. When things are starting and you're going to try and create a new event, a new direction, and so it is in the beginning that things get all, fluffed around because you're bringing ingredients together. So I'm going to say, while we've got all this stuff flying around here, if we wish to persevere,
Which is why, Michael, Brian Singh, and thank you for your comments, why Brian Singh started Full Disclosure Now. Brian, can you tell us where people can find you and why did you start this project?
Yeah, well, I mean, because I'm running into many people in the field who have overlapping testimony, and many of whom they didn't meet each other until recently, or they still haven't met each other, about secret space programs, time travel, deep underground military bases. And, people have gotten killed for a lot of this information going back to Phil Schneider and beforehand, and so, and there's a testimony of the one Men in Black, Joseph, I forget his last name, and it's read by one of his close friends after the guy died, recounting his testimony as a Man in Black, or the DeSteven brothers, who their grandfather had above Cosmos clearance and was a UFO crash recovery specialist. And it goes on and on and on. And so, I like to operate on what we call actionable intelligence. And, by bringing this information out and naming, well, this is where the entrance is to this deep underground military base. And these are the Colonel Michael Aquino and his cohorts are abducting children, and why they're doing it. This is why I do it is so that we can achieve our Star Trek future. And that begins with full disclosure, because humanity, we need to know all the facts on the table, not just, out of hand discount things because they sound beyond the pale, Draconians, Greys, Anunnaki, whatever. And having informed, full information, we can go from there. Thank you.
And Brian, where can people find you?
Fulldisclosure.live or fulldisclosure.network. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian with a Y. So Brian Bowden.
Yes.
Tell a little bit about yourself and where can people find you?
Sure. They can find me Wednesdays on my profile on YouTube at Brian Bowden. We do Third Eye Live from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. It's a variety of information. I research and study it all for 45 plus years. Okay. I'm very open to everybody. And the one thing I'm not open to is when people try to Nostradamus it. And that's when they backpedal and they try to fit all these things into multiple quatrains to prove the future or what just happened. And I think this is where we get a problem. People like, you can predict the virus is going to, I could come out with a book and publish it right now. And 50 years from now, I could say there's going to be an earth change and this continent's going to come. And you know enough about things and put these vague predictions in there without giving it's COVID, it's going to be called this or that. And I'll spin the dice on that and I'll probably be pretty accurate with what I'm saying. It doesn't necessarily mean that my information is the only information. So I take everybody's information. I love meeting new people because the way these creatures operate, these species, they gravitate to what resonates with them and preach their point of view and narrative. And you got to take everything in consideration and the evidence is coming through. And then go from that. You can't discredit anybody at this point.
I absolutely agree. And Brian, you are a remote viewer, and aren't you also a Sasquatch hunter?
I research cryptids, Bigfoot, winged cryptids, things that look like werewolves and strange. I like that more so than anything else. I definitely do a lot of UFO and with a lot of people that have been abducted and experiencers. I had a group where we did a grassroots, give them a safe space to speak without being ridiculed. But I could introduce you a dozen people that have been reptilians have come to them, and then these other creatures that look like Ewoks have come to them, and it just keeps going on and on. But you're talking about hundreds of different races that exist, and it's not just what Billy says. It's each one has their own story to tell.
Ryan, can people find you on Facebook?
Yes, when I'm not in Facebook jail.
Okay, they didn't know. And thank you very much for all your contributions. Also, you can find Brian on the Awake Nation.
Yes.
John Renee, where can people find you?
Well, I do have one final comment, and I do believe that we are all connected, and everyone has a mission when they come to this earth. And I think that each one of you are on that mission, and when we work together, we can achieve it. So I think that is the goal. In the end, is that humanity comes together and shares what they have together. So, and you can find me here on Agent X11. You can find me on Trauma Triage on Wednesdays. You can find me on the Awake Nation on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And you can also find me on X at Joan Renee 27.
Thank you so very much. Joan Renee is my co-host on the Awake Nation News, as well as the Awake Nation, along with David Zublik, who is David Zublik's Awake Nation, who's actually one of my best friends. And then you can also find me here on Agent X11. We do a show every day from 12 to 1, Monday through Thursday. On Fridays, we do 4 shows. And as a matter of fact, Michael is slated for one of those shows. So we're going to bring you back. Michael, please text me some of the videos that you would like us to show. And let's do a little bit more preface on some of the information that you have. And hopefully we'll be able to, we'll have a different crew on our Friday show. Perhaps Brian with a Y might join us. That would be wonderful. And you can find me on the Awake Nation Monday through Friday. That's 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. That's Eastern time. We do 1 hour of news, 7 to 8 a.m. And then we do 2 hours with interviews and commentaries from people from all walks of life, all over the world, directors, producers, authors, political commentaries. And if you'd like to find us, you can find us on the David Zubik channel on Rumble. And then if you'd like to share, and subscribe to the Agent X11 channel, that's how we get our information out there. And that is the point of Agent X11, to engage people in conversation and to share ideas with one another. And hopefully I tell everyone, don't believe anything you hear. Don't believe anything I say, for sure. Please research everything. Do your own independent research. I like to talk to everybody. That's just who I am. Even when I was homeless at one point, I had business cards and I was handing them out and saying, call me. So I enjoy discourse of all kinds. And if you would like to be if you'd like to be on Agent X11 or on the Trauma Triage team or on the Awake Nation, or even on the Awake Nation News as an investigative reporter or journalist, please text my phone at 619-779-9771. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so we are out of here. Shepherd out.
Renee out.
Ryan out.
Solar B out.
Goodbye for today from Agent X11, Hollywood Dark Journalist. We post new episodes daily. Check out our true crime episodes Wednesdays and Fridays. Don't forget to watch our main show, David Zubrick's Awake Nation, on the David Zubrick channel on Rumble, live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern.